Sometimes all it takes is a handful of official records, a few old photos, and a little bit of data to piece together a family's incredible, world-spanning journey. And today, that's exactly what we're going to do for one family, the Eastwells.
All right, so every great story has a beginning, right? Well, to really understand this one, we're actually going to start at the end. We're starting with a story that was literally carved in stone.
So take a look at this. At first glance, it's a weathered, broken gravestone in a cemetery in Queensland, Australia. It marks the final resting place of Edward and Marianne Eastwell. But this stone, believe me, is so much more than an ending. It's the final landmark of a journey that crossed oceans and generations. So, what story can a broken stone really tell us? To answer that, we have to rewind the clock, and not by a few years. We're talking nearly 8 decades before the dates you see on this stone, and we have to travel halfway across the world. And that brings us right to the heart of it all, the Great Voyage. This is the chapter where the story of the Australian Eastwells truly begins, with a massive, life-altering decision to leave everything they knew behind. Our main character, the person at the center of this, is Edward Eastwell. He was born in 1844 in a tiny English parish called Great Gransden. Now, for the first decade of his life, he was a typical English boy. But his parents, John and Charlotte, they had some pretty audacious plans that would change his life forever. And this document right here, this captures the exact moment they left. It's a real snippet from the passenger manifest for the ship General Hewitt. If you look closely, you can see them, Eastwell, John, age 37, his wife Charlotte, and their children. And right there, listed as being 10 years old, is young Edward. This document is the last record we have of their life in England. Just 10 years old. Can you even imagine that? At an age where your whole world is your street and your school, you board a wooden sailing ship for a months-long voyage to a continent on the other side of the planet. For the Eastwell family, back in 1854, this was it. There was no going back. But this journey of hope was also marked by just profound tragedy. The genealogical records show this absolutely heartbreaking entry for Edward's infant sister Esther, who was born in the very same year they sailed. This quote says it all. Died on board General Hewitt ship on the way to Australia. She was buried at sea, never even getting to see the New World. This timeline just lays out the events of that single crazy year. The family decided to leave their homeland forever. They buried a child in the middle of the ocean, and they arrived as immigrants to start their lives completely over. The amount of change and hardship packed into 1 year is just immense. So, they survived the journey, but what came next? Well, this next chapter shows us how a family that endured so much began to put down roots in a new and, for them, a very foreign land. The family made their new home in what was then the colony of Queensland, Australia. And it was here, under a different sky, that the 10-year-old boy from the ship grew into a man. He worked, he adopted, and he started to dream of his own future. And that future took a huge leap forward on August 12, 1870. In the town of Warwick, a 26-year-old Edward married Marianne Carter. Now, this wasn't just a wedding. This was the official beginning of a new, Australian-born branch of the Eastwell family tree. And that union leads us right into our next chapter, an Australian family. The legacy of that long, difficult sea voyage was about to be cemented in a new generation, born thousands of miles away from their ancestral home. These two records, side by side, perfectly capture that generational shift. On the left, from the records of his youth, we see Edward listed as a child of John Eastwell, the immigrant. On the right, years later, the records show him as the parent of his own son, George. He completed the cycle, from the son of an immigrant to the father of a native-born Australian. But history has a strange and often tragic way of echoing itself. One generation after Edward made his life-changing journey from the old world to the new, one of his Australian-born sons would make the same transoceanic journey, but in the opposite direction, and for a much, much darker reason. His name was James Henry Eastwell. And his life story is captured in this single, brutal line from the historical records. Died 12 Oct. 1917, WWI, Passchendaele, Belgium. The son of the man who fled England for a new life died fighting for the British Empire in one of the most horrific battles in human history. The stark contrast on this slide reveals this powerful, tragic symmetry. The father's journey was from England to Australia, for the promise of a new life. The son's journey was from Australia back to Europe to fight and die in a world war, a voyage of hope set against a voyage into conflict. And that brings us to our final section, Echoes of a Legacy, where we return right back to where it all started, that quiet cemetery in Queensland. So Edward lived to be 79, passing away in 1923, just 6 years after his son James was killed on the battlefield. His wife Marianne lived to be 81. They lived long lives, witnessing the incredible growth of the family they founded, but also having to endure its deepest sorrows. You know, when we first saw this stone, it was simply an old, broken marker. But now we see it for what it truly is. It's a monument to a 10-year-old boy who crossed an ocean, built a life from nothing, raised a family, and buried a son lost to a war on the other side of the world. This stone isn't about an ending. It's about the entire, incredible journey. So we're left with this question. How many epic journeys, how much hope, tragedy, and resilience are hidden behind a single family name etched on a weathered stone? It really makes you wonder what unbelievable stories are just waiting to be discovered in your own history.